Hey guys, this is your host Nitin Binhani and a very warm welcome to my startup podcast channel Desire Audio, where we share real stories with real learnings. So my today's guest is James Church, who is the author of best-selling book Investable Entrepreneur. James is also the co-founder of Robot Mascot, UK's leading pitch agency. So James works with the founders around the world to create great investment materials which exponentially raise their funding chances by 30x. And in this podcast, James shares his valuable insights on how to be an investable entrepreneur and create a great pitching story with his unique methodology. So let's welcome today's special guest. Hi James, welcome to Desire Audio and thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Excited to do this today.
So let's start with, why is it so difficult to raise funding, particularly in the early stages?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So in my experience, ultimately, it comes down to the communication. So a founder's ability to communicate their idea effectively to an investor in the early stages. So in later stage investments, you've got much more proof, much more traction, much more evidence, which gives investors confidence. But in the earlier stages, you don't have so much proof, so much evidence, and therefore you have to rely much more on your ability to communicate your story and get investors excited. So essentially what's happening is investors and entrepreneurs are speaking different languages. So investors like to speak the language of risk, assets, proof, implementation, whereas founders prefer to talk about possibilities, income, opportunities, and ideas. And essentially, while founders are talking about the same thing to an investor, this business that could achieve great things, they're talking about it in such different ways that the investors can't see the opportunity within the business.
Okay. So which are the most common mistakes that entrepreneurs do while pitching to the investors?
I think really it's presenting themselves as what I call an investable entrepreneur. So an investable entrepreneur is what I give as a label to the top few percent of founders who successfully raise investment. So only about 1%, it's actually less than 1% of founders successfully raise investment from angel investors and VC firms combined. So those top few percent of founders who are out there securing investment, I call them investable entrepreneurs. And the biggest mistake is not being able to present yourself as the type of founder an investor could back. Now, I'll break that down for you. So the first is to demonstrate that you're highly resourceful. By highly resourceful, I mean you're able to get people to buy into your vision. Founders that can get people to buy into their vision can access capital when they need it. They can access incredible talent. They can create commercial partnerships and corporate relationships that are going to help the business succeed. And really, an investor is looking for the type of founder that can make all that happen, can get people to buy into their idea, buy into their vision, and they're highly resourceful. They can make stuff happen for their business. The second thing that they're looking for is a founder that understands the financial risks involved and doesn't just focus on the financial rewards. It's very easy to just look at the top level income and look at how much money this business could potentially make without properly understanding the financial risks involved in actually getting to that milestone, getting to that multi-million pound business. So they're looking for someone who can understand the financial risks and is appreciative of the risks they're asking the investor to take, as well as just focusing on that big kind of pot of money at the end of the journey. And then the final thing that makes up what I call an investable entrepreneur is a founder that can understand how to create commercial success from their idea. So in the early stages, it's, you tend to focus on how awesome your idea is, and there's a lot less focus on the implementation strategy. How are we actually going to take this idea to market? How are we going to commercialize it so we can generate revenues, profit, underlying valuable assets that are all going to result in a return on investment for investors? So you have to have a really clear plan on where you are now and what you're going to do in the short term. So where you're going to spend their money in the first instance for that seed round investment, but also what's going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years as you look to grow this business and get it to the point of exit. So you might look at strategic acquisitions or launching into new markets or launching into new territories, new verticals, new products. All of these things that happen over the next sort of 5 years, 7 years to the point of exit, you need to have that roadmap planned out so an investor can see. They know that those things are a long way off and may or may not happen, but just showing that you've got the mindset of a entrepreneur that's looking to build a scalable business and you understand what it takes. So like Facebook, for example, I think it was 21 acquisitions they made between startup and exit. So, and very few early stage founders consider the fact that they might need to raise some investment later down the line for some strategic acquisitions. So those founders that do kind of plan something like that into their strategy suddenly come across as a very different type of founder than investors are used to speaking to. They actually understand how this business works, of building a scale up and exiting it at a high value. So yeah, they're the three things that I think are the biggest mistakes, just focusing on the idea and not really getting into the meat of how you're going to build the business to the point at which it becomes a valuable exit for the investor.
That's great. So how does one create a great pitching story for their business?
Yeah, really good question. It's something that I help founders with. The truth of the matter is there is no one size fits all kind of pitch structure. And obviously we're looking for a 15 to 20 slide punchy pitch that cuts through the noise. So what we do at Robot Mascot is we've created the 5-act structure. And this is 5 key phases of a pitch narrative that you need to have. But as long as you follow this structure, you'll have a good pitch narrative. The first thing is the hook, and this might be a couple of slides. You're focusing on your big vision, something that's really exciting that gets the investor wanting to read more. If you're later stage and you have some incredible results, or you're trusted by a really big brand is backing you, then you might put that in the hook. But it's that thing that makes the investor go, wow, this sounds exciting, I want to read more. The next phase is the essence. The essence of the business is essentially talking about your value proposition. What's the problem you're solving? What's the solution? Why is now a good time to invest in this business and make this business a success? Who is this product for and why do they care about it? So it's setting up the kind of the value proposition of what the company is, how it works, and why it's going to be a success. And then you have the evidence. The third stage is the evidence. Normally, if we were writing a film, for example, or a novel, this would be the climax of the story. So in a pitch, this is the evidence. This is the traction, the validation, the proof that you have something the market wants. So you could have a great idea and you could set up with a great hook and a great essence this incredible idea that everyone's excited about, but this is the bit where you go, oh wow, and actually everyone wants this. There's a big market for this. There's proof that people want it. And by evidence, by proof, I don't mean it has to be customers paying you to solve their problem. It doesn't even have to be users on your platform. In an early stage, evidence could be quotes from market leaders that say that this is a desirable thing for the industry and would be very successful in their experience. Or it could be surveys or focus groups, but just really just lay on that evidence that the market actually wants it, and you've taken it beyond an idea and into something that's refined into kind of existence, that people want it. You have proof and evidence that people want it. So that's the climax. And then coming down from the climax, you start to talk about the plan, the stepping stones to success. So I said earlier about how an investable entrepreneur doesn't just talk about the great idea, they actually talk about the financial risks and the stepping stones for creating commercial success. This is where you then talk about that strategy. You have a few slides on the size of the market, your marketing strategy might be, what your development roadmap might be. They could be easily to articulate that you have a clear plan in place to make this happen. And then the final 5th stage of this narrative is the ask, essentially where you're asking for investment. So you're telling them the investment opportunity and you're setting up that financial story. So you're showing your financial performance over 3 to 5 years. You're delivering them some key growth metrics that you're hoping to achieve in terms of number of users, number of customers. So you're mapping out your projections for them. You're talking about your team, the team who's going to be asking for the money and using the money and building the money. One thing I would say on that is if you've got an incredible team, so say you've got someone who's exited 5 businesses already, they're on your co-founding team, then you might want to put the team in the hook. The team itself might be the hook at the beginning. But for most startups, most founders, the team goes towards the R saying, we're the team that's asking for the money. And this is how much we're asking for. Here's how we're going to spend it. And here's some key objectives we're going to hit with your money. And once we've hit those objectives, we're going to be in a position to raise again and do our next round of funding and scale on from there. So that's the 5-act structure: the hook, the essence, the evidence, the plan, and the ask. And if you follow that format, you have a great pitch narrative, a great story that you can tell investors and engage with what you're trying to say.
Awesome. Now, how can entrepreneurs really make their ventures truly fundable or investor ready?
So the reality is that you have to become an expert in the mind of the investor. If you want to succeed, you have to understand how they think. And as I touched on earlier, they think very differently to a founder who loves to talk about possibilities and opportunities and ideas and are excited about the future. So it's a founder will kind of point to the moon, whereas an investor looks around for the fully developed rocket. You know, they're looking for the proof. They're looking for the asset to be in place. They're not looking for the potential. They're looking for the here and now. And then if they like that, they'll look to see what the potential is and what type of return they'll get. So you have to kind of become an expert in the mind of the investor. So when I talk to investors, they generally say the idea itself is about 20% of their decision making. 80% of their decision making on whether or not they invest in a business is beyond the idea. The idea itself doesn't actually matter. It's your ability to implement it. So the truth of the matter is that you need to become an expert in the mind of an investor. The investor doesn't actually care so much about your idea as you think. What they care about is your ability to commercialize that idea and generate them a return. Their focus is on the exit, that prize that they're going to get at the end. You need to focus their minds on how you're going to deliver them that exit. If you look at the entrepreneurs that succeed, the most successful entrepreneurs that have these multi-million pound or billion-dollar exits, they're the ones that have been able to commercialize the idea. They've been able to implement that strategy. So that's what the investor's really looking for, is that entrepreneur that can not only have a great idea and sell in that idea to people and get people excited by that idea, but also has a clear focus on how they're going to scale the business to exit them. So yeah, focus on the exit, focus on the investor's prize. How are you going to get them to that prize and how are you going to get them a return on that investment? And then showcase you have that strategic implementation strategy. You've got to demonstrate that. That's where a more detailed business plan or roadmap comes in, like demonstrating you have that implementation strategy. You can make this a success. Talk about your insights into the industry. So you might have personal insights that make you the only person that could possibly make this idea a success. Even if another entrepreneur was to have a similar idea, they don't have the insights and the knowledge and the experience that you have to make this a success. And if you can bundle all that up rather than just focus on how awesome your idea is, you suddenly start to become a more investable entrepreneur that an investor can look at and say, I trust this person with my money. I trust this founder with my money, and that they're going to turn this money into something of much higher value in a relatively short space of time, in a 5 to 7 year time frame. So that's what they're looking for. They're seeing you as a vehicle to wealth creation, and they don't really care about your idea, quite frankly.
Amazing insights, James. Let's get on to the metrics. What metrics should be tracked by the entrepreneurs which will make their ventures a credible investment opportunity?
Yeah, so there are obviously so many metrics, things like recurring revenue and those types of metrics. A couple that I always look at is marketing as a percentage of revenue. So how much is your marketing spend as a percentage of revenue? And that applies to whatever sort of business you're in, because ultimately, if we go back to what we were just talking about, how investors need to focus on the exit, on the prize, they want to see that exit valuation. So if they're doing a valuation on your company, looking at what the exit potential might be, an EBITDA multiple, a profit multiple on your year 5 financials to give them a sense of what this could be worth at the point of exit. If you're looking at some key metrics and seeing that your marketing spend is way too small, when really it should be between, depending on your business, between sort of 5 to 20% of revenue, they instantly know that your EBITDA isn't credible, and therefore your exit valuation that you're promising them isn't credible either. And the same goes for revenue per staff. This is a key one because founders will often underestimate the amount of staff they actually need. So to give you some context on that, the average business in the UK earn for every member of staff is £135,000. Netflix, on the other hand, earn $1 million in revenue for every member of staff they have, because they're a highly scalable business that use technology to replace the need for human involvement. Amazon are somewhere in the middle because they have a warehouse full of people packing boxes and shipping out product. So they're £400,000 of revenue per staff. So if you're going to an investor and they look at your financials and your staffing costs, the number of staff you have is say 2, 3, 4, 5 million, which isn't uncommon because you never budget for enough staff, then they know you haven't budgeted enough for the staff, and therefore that throws your whole forecast into question. It throws your EBITDA multiple, your exit valuation into question. If you're a tech company and you're showing a kind of a 300k to 800k revenue per staff, you're probably in the right ballpark. So things like that are obviously important. Things like customer acquisition cost and those types of things. Burn rate is another important one. How much are you spending and how often, and comparing that to your cash flow. So when it comes to the end of your forecast period, is your cash flow zero, or do you have some buffer? So you can look at the burn rate, say, okay, this company's got a burn rate of 40 grand a month, which means they're spending 40,000 more a month than they're earning. Do they have, at the end of this sort of 12-month runway, do they have £40,000 in their bank account? Do they have 80,000 in their bank account? Or do they have zero? Because if they've got zero, this is high risk. You've got no buffer. If things take slightly longer, if you don't raise your second round of investment till month 13, 14, 15, then how are you going to pay your staff? How are you going to pay your suppliers? You're going to be in negative cash. So things like that all start to paint a picture of how well managed this company is going to be and whether they can trust you as an entrepreneur with their money. So I prefer to talk about those types of metrics because they're about you being a credible entrepreneur with a credible plan.
Finally, let's talk about your book, Investable Entrepreneur. If you could share a brief on that and how can our listeners really get it?
Yeah, last year I launched my book, Investable Entrepreneur, which covers a lot of the information and the theories that I've covered in today's episode. When it launched, it became a #1 Amazon bestseller, which I was absolutely thrilled about. So really, I wanted to write this book because raising investment is such a complex process for new and experienced founders alike. So we work with clients who are brand new founders. They've never raised investment before and they've never run a business before, but we also work with entrepreneurs who this is their third or fourth business, and again, they've never raised investment before. So even with all that experience of having built a number of businesses, they've never raised investment, and it's just as confusing for them as anybody else. So I really wanted to write that book to kind of demystify the space. It's so complex. Just 1% of founders are actually succeeding in raising capital. So I really wanted to just make sure that there was a guide there that was making accessing capital more easy to understand, more accessible, because a lot of the content, a lot of the language out there is from investors or from consultants who almost talk in riddles. And I very much wanted to be on the founder's side and make it simple, easy, give some clear steps and guides. And I hope I've achieved that. I think based on the feedback from the readers, I have achieved that in this book, which is great. Yeah, really, the book goes into much greater depth on the ideas that we've covered today. We talk about the mind of the investor and what it really is that they're looking for beyond your idea. We look at the funding assets you need to create a successful campaign, so how you would go about creating your business case, your business strategy, your financial projections, your pitch assets. We look at how you promote your investment opportunity, because it's all well and good being able to present it well, but you need to go out and find investors. You need to do some deal sourcing. So we talk about that. And finally, we unpack our methodology that we've created at Robot Mascot for how we increase our clients' success by 30 times more than the industry benchmarks. So yeah, you can get it on Amazon. There's a free PDF version on our website, robotmascot.co.uk. So feel free to go there, and your listeners can access a completely free
So with this, we have reached at the end of this podcast. James, it was a pleasure to have you on Jazair Audio, and thank you for sharing great insights with us.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Are you a founder of an early stage startup and looking to raise funding? Get your startup investor ready before even you start pitching to your prospective investors. For know-how, please visit www.jazaro.in. That is www.jasaro.in.
Lastly, I want to thank all the listeners who took their valuable time to listen to this podcast. Keep rocking, be safe, and don't forget to share.